Excuse me, hold on. There's a magic circle loose in my studio. And that magic studio is in the form of tempered steel that gets bent around like 5 times, I guess. I should know. But it's 15 feet of tempered steel that's bolted together and then has cushions that go on it that you put between your legs, like the famous actress and the Thigh Master, or the Thigh Buster or something. But spring tension in adduction, which is a carryover from the last broadcast. And when I went to strike this bowl, the metal of the magic circle totally killed the vibe of the bowl. Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor. The last broadcast about the upstretch and uniform usage, if this doesn't interest you in this broadcast, I'd go back to at least look at that one. Because why? Because I don't know if I have as concrete an exercise out of the classical Pilates repertoire of exercises to make the point about the MMP point of view and uniform engagement to get uniform development and so on and so forth. So I feel like I'm in a review of yesterday, and because there's a magic circle loose amongst my feet. And number 1 out of 4 I think I have today in terms of titles in the broadcast is that Pilates will never fit. Pilates will never fit. And I mean that in the best of ways and in the most hopefully honoring way of Pilates as whatever it is, that however you seek to make it fit within your realm of interest, be that artistic or science, medical or physical, biology or physics, maybe someday it will fit. Because it fits within an understanding of itself for me as an ideal that you reach for and can have a sensation out of it. So it's an ideal that you can feel. Okay? Now, when you seek to make distinction, yeah, judge not, lest you be judged. When you seek to make distinction, my notes just say that Pilates will never fit. And that's because it is transcendent. In how it looks at a human being, that's not so transcendent, I don't think. But it looks at the human being as having capacities of being, thinking, and observing. And then when you get into looking at observing the way quantum physics considers observing, in a way, Pilates completely fits into our current view of the world, our current state-of-the-art view of the world. And see, that's what I'm dying to tell Joe, talk to Joe about if he doesn't already know. But usurpation, I think, is when you take something for your own. And I grant you, I took spirit in Joe's definition and took it for my own to mean observing, you know, and as such a capacity other than thinking and being. And that's what makes Pilates in and of itself, all by itself, Joe's alone. It's a transcendent message of a human being to humanity. Number two, you don't know what's coming on YouTube. Number two is this title. It's believe what you want. Ignore the rest. Everybody else does. Believe what you want. Ignore the rest. Everybody else does. And maybe I'm pointing, if I'm saying to do that and everyone else does it, I'm merely saying that we all create our own simulation of what's out there, and what individuals make of Pilates is no different or less individual in nature. So number three. Really? Number three is well, I just said the word individual, and it made me think of where I was in my notes here. So it's a good segue, because in my title it is Pilates is personal. And I think we all relate to, or I relate to, Pilates being something personal. And yet, to accentuate how that is, that it's personal, it's individual, right? It's as a human being making use of my capacities. Moving. To condition myself in preparation for what comes next. I mean, that's Joe as far as I can say. But insofar as it's personal, yes, and it's individual in its nature, the other thing is that it's sensational, right? It's not something that everyone intellectualizes over as much as someone has a sensational connection to, at whatever level it does or doesn't exist. In the tsunami, there will be many heralding cries for how to achieve distinction and separate oneself from everything else. You know, to me, I think in a way to achieve some kind of float, if you will, or support, and I want to suggest you just stay focused on you as a business and recognize that the nature of what you do as an MMP instructor is very individual in nature and understanding and depth. And so far, it doesn't apparently appeal to a broad part of a spectrum. So know what you know and share what you can. And in knowing what you know and sharing what you can, take confidence. See, my point is, my note said, take confidence in the understanding, in understanding the essence of what it is deeper than most want to go. I mean, understanding Pilates at this level, where you're after the complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit, as a state of being in the body in the moment of the doing. And you're doing that by considering the human being to have capacities of being, thinking, and observing. And then as instructor, your instructions allow a student to pursue that. Oh, and then the 4 over here. What I haven't said very well is to recognize, the deeper you recognize how Pilates is open and available to any human being at an individual, personal, sensational level. And that only in the exploration of expanding that personal relationship can you get drawn into causes seeking to make a distinction, either in prestige or billable price per hour. All of that will always be in sway within the human culture, and then within the Pilates culture, within that culture, the point is to recognize that within the MMP point of view, Pilates sort of is what it is, and it stands on evidence of Joe's and offers perspective for what anybody else wishes to make of it, if it's any good at all, because it'll have some consistency of perception, right? It's a really tough combo, because in core new tension, in recognizing that oppositional rotation between axes is biomechanical in nature and and sensational. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The reason Pilates will never fit is because Pilates acknowledges the capacities within the human being to do what lies beyond thinking, which is observing and way too much of a threat to even acknowledge presence or input of observing, let alone coordinate it with the thinking going on and the body trying to catch up or keep up or lead the way. So number four, and then I gotta try to make this simpler and less self-indulgent, and yet here I talk about me and my Siddhartha seat. Well, Siddhartha is reference to a character in a novel by Herman Hesse, and at one point that character found their place sitting on one side of a river and ferrying people across back and forth. Okay, and perhaps it's all vanity, but I can't help but acknowledge the peace that I've had over such a long time, purveying people from one shore to the other. And what shore is that? And if you've listened to any of these prior to this, there's two things to take away from yours truly, and that's CT and MMP. Two things, CT and MMP. And both of those things are identifications. So that's how I try to explain it or present it to you, so that you at least know how I try to explain where this comes from, or at least how I see it. With the help of my students, whose reflections take me to a deeper sense of what's motivating my passion to project. Just like you, just like all of us. The two things that you have the opportunity of crossing from one shore to the other on is core new tension, and that's, by definition, mine, oppositional rotation between axes, that's would be my claim to fame if I were to have one, or acknowledgement and shame, but I'm pretty proud of just pointing to something that you can embrace intellectually and feel sensationally. Because when you embrace in core new tension, you can feel the alignment that plays off of that oppositional rotation between those axes, creating the rotation. So, each axis creating an oppositional rotation. I wish I could live long enough to see someone that really had recognition and acknowledgement from others that the math that you come up with represents what I'm talking about. So, core new tension is biomechanical And to me, why it's so important, or why I came to the identification of core nutension, is in my pursuit of Joe's statement that contrology develops the body uniformly. And in the pursuit of developing the body uniformly, to me, you end up embracing the physics that exist in the body, whether you know it or not. And to the extent that you're aware of it and embrace it, helps distribute the load of your body in space by distributing that load across more musculature that's more evenly balanced. For some mysterious reason or another, seems to be reaching into or utilizing the physics that you get out of that. You don't have to understand it to at least appreciate that, yeah, that's core nutension. And then the second thing is 1 out of 10,000 views of Pilates. Really, there's a word, Pilates. And from that word comes the mother of the 10,000, or the word is the mother of the 10,000 views. The 10,000 upon, excuse me, 10,000 views. This one view takes the evidence of Joe's definition, promise, and sequence, and theorizes an ideal based on that evidence. That points to not only the pursuit of the ideal, but the manifestation of the movement that comes out of it is the real, what becomes real. And because it comes from the ideal, it's as real as you're going to get. Maybe that's not true, but you know, when you're reaching for the ideal, whatever becomes real is as good as you get. Maybe that's how it goes, right? So when Joe says contrology develops the body uniformly, whatever else you take that to mean, within MMP, the uniform develops uniformly. You get to from engagement in core nutension. If you have a better way to do it than that, please let me know. And I'll want to share it with everyone that I know. And then when it comes to the ideal, the definition of uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement, that's my best effort at a definition of the ideal in Joe's original work based on his definition, his promise, and his sequence, those three things. So it's not a big, broad, everybody you got to know, this is very narrow. It's based on exactly what anyone can read in Joe's book. And the reason to know this is so that you can at least say you're aware of it to the point that you don't seem ignorant when someone else is talking about it. So, right before I go, that means that in the MMP point of view, that the hips in the body, the hips, physically are are capable of making rotation at the hips. It's a notion or emotion that comes with it heavy undertones of taboo and guard. There you go. Taboo and guard. But in MMP, the hips create and use rotation at the hips to stabilize itself in space, and it goes beyond that and oppositionally creates tension between its knees and its shoulders, and shoulders to ears, to engage itself muscularly. So the body does it. The key thing on the second thing in terms of MMP and what makes that point of view different, as I've just said, it's based on evidence. It's a theory of an ideal, blah blah. I'm losing my train of thought again. But what makes MMP's point of view about Pilates, that it was not going to fit into anything else, really, is its individual nature, its personal nature of that capacity of a human being to coordinate all three capacities. So it's not just body, mind, and more mind. And any effort to establish distinction by level of mind without acknowledging the requisite participation of the capacities beyond the thinking of being and observing. MMP point of view. And so those are the two things. And it's the observing part that connects you to the universe faster than light, all within the current view of quantum reality, and makes Joe's method that much more relevant and that much more significant and that much deeper and profound in and of itself, all by itself. I think, by identifying, and in that regard, maybe the ideal is one thing and observing is another, but certainly a key aspect of MMP is the acknowledgement of the capacity of the human beings observing, and that it's necessary participation to achieve the coordination of the observing, thinking, and being of the human being, of the human. So I don't repeat the word being. Okay. That was gibberish and way too little, coming from way too much, but it was the best I could do today. So life can't live forever, and read between the lines and see behind the curtain, add two and two, direct your thinking. Guys,